Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Erika Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Erika Andresen. Hi, Erika.
Hi, Adi. Hi, your listeners.
Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Erika, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast because I'm going to introduce you in a second with your bio, which is amazing. But we're going to talk about business continuity. And I have so many questions for you because it totally aligns with processes, because one of the reasons why we document processes and procedures is for risk mitigation and continuity and knowledge transfer and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So having you as an expert on this podcast is going to contribute a lot to, I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot, and also our listeners will do the same.
Awesome.
Yeah. Before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to Joshua Keane, who introduced us. And I recorded a podcast I have an episode on the System Simplified with Joshua that we recorded. It was about risk mitigation in businesses. Joshua is an expert in terms of how to prevent risk and how to mitigate risk. And we talked about a lot of actionable things that business owners can take in order to mitigate risk. And I'm going to put that episode in our show notes so people can listen to it as well. So thank you, Joshua, for that. And you were also on this podcast. So if people, after they listen to ours and they want to know more, they can actually look it up and listen to that episode, which we should include as well.
Yeah, I think he's releasing on the 29th of February, he told me.
Okay, great. Good. So it will be out by the time this podcast is out and people can listen to it. Absolutely. All right. So here we go. Here's the official bio, and you can add anything to it. Okay. So it's very, very impressive here. So you are the founder of EaaS Consulting. Do you pronounce it EaaS? How do you abbreviate it?
It's EaaS. It's my play on software as a service. It's Erika as a service.
Erika as a service. I love it. EaaS Consulting you're a recovering lawyer. Okay, mm-hmm. That's one thing. And you're a certified business continuity professional. You're a professor of emergency management, and you're a veteran. Mm-hmm. So that's a perfect combination to actually talk to us about continuity here. And you authored the Amazon bestseller, How Not to Kill Your Business, Grow Your Business in Any Environment, Navigate Volatility, and Successfully Recover When Things Go Wrong.
Yes.
That's good. All right. And you are a well-regarded expert in your field. You are quoted in publication like Forbes. And you are being invited as a lecturer to MIT's upcoming professional program on advanced business resiliency this summer. This is exciting. Yes. Very exciting. Very, very exciting. Okay, good. Well, anything you want to add to your bio or any story that you would like to tell us in terms of being a recovery lawyer or recovering lawyer or veteran? And how did you end up with business continuity as your field of expertise?
Well, I guess I can most easily answer all those questions in one simple way. I used to say that I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up because I kept changing my career from a corporate lawyer. Then I joined the active duty military, and then I got out and then had my own business. But I think more appropriately, it's that I was constantly evolving and turning into the person I was meant to be and picking up skills along the way. So it's interesting. It is an interesting trajectory. The experiences that I had in each step of the way made me the perfect continuity professional that I am now, because I can incorporate skills from all of those things. I am really great at interviewing clients about what exactly is in their business. I don't need to be an expert in your business. I can start asking you questions and I'll understand it more deeply than you think I should, because it's like, well, did she do this too? No, I just know how to ask questions and bring out stuff. And I got that from interviewing clients. and witnesses when I was prosecuting. And then I also had experience responding to and advising on emergency management issues when I was in the military. It was a flooding in one place I was located. There were wildland fires in another. There was a pandemic. And then when I was deployed in Afghanistan, there was a lot of things I was advising on. And then the military, the whole entire time you're in the military, every single day, they call it continuity of operations, not business continuity, but it's the same thing. The principles are the same. It's because if you think of the military as a 24/7 international corporation with one mission, if any cog falls out, they need to replace it instantly or unless the mission fails. And that's just unacceptable. So every single position in the military practices this. And it was just a really easy translation to do that for businesses. And, business continuity is something that international corporations do, financial institutions do, higher education institutions do, and healthcare facilities do. But the small businesses, by and large, don't. And neither do really like medium-sized business. They don't do it enough, but it's mostly because they don't know about it or they don't know how to do it. And that's where I decided I wanted to come in. And I left the military because I wanted more control over my life. I didn't want to keep moving around. I didn't want to keep being single because, like, no offense to the men out there, but no man is ever leaving his job to follow a woman around. And that's, what I found out in my dating life. And I'm like, I just want more control over my personal life.
Sure, I can understand that. All right, well, that leads me to my next question, which is, give us an overview of what are the main principles in business continuity.
Well, the main principle is essentially you want to be able to stay active and operational during any type of disaster and disruption. And the party line is disaster disruption, which people interpret as negative. And it's usually they think of just natural disasters. And it's not just natural disasters. There are also man-made disasters, which are like active shooter. There's also like hazmat incidents. But that falls under disaster. Disruption can be something simple like a key piece of machinery no longer working, or a key knowledge worker or a leader leaving either by their own volition or they die. Like, what are you going to do at that point? But I also found more recently that a disruption could also be unexpected overnight growth, basically, like you become viral. And if you don't have the proper procedures in place, and you have SOPs in place to bring people on quickly to help you, you're going to wind up falling flat on your face and failing. The very thing that made you popular is actually going to turn people off because, number one, you're going to degrade your current customer service levels to the people you already have. You're not going to be able to bring on new clients the way you should. So that's also going to suffer. And then you're going to wind up making shortcuts to try to make up for the two things you're now lacking. And you're going to wind up degrading the very thing that made people want to be interested in you. So that is like a really good, I think, nutshell for business continuity. But the other thing I love to say about business continuity, and Josh and I talked about this and he realized he wasn't going the full length. I like to say that business continuity picks up where risk management fails, because everyone thinks like, oh, I've done risk management, it's fine. It's not fine, because risk management, of the 4 ways you can deal with risk, one of them is mitigate. And mitigating is not eradicating. There's still a chance there's going to be a failure, but you have to think about what happens at that point. So I love using the example of if you're driving and your plan is to go from A to B. So if you do any risk management on a 2-lane highway, you have an overlay map of where the potholes are. As you're driving along, all of a sudden something happens. Maybe it's a rock slide. Maybe there's cattle on the road. Maybe there's an accident. And you can't proceed because you have that on one side, you have the pothole on your side. So what do? If you've only done risk management, you can't do anything. But if you've done business continuity, you're going to pop open your trunk and you're going to pull out the bucket of asphalt and shovel that you have with you, fill in your pothole, and then be on your merry way.
Beautiful analogy. So thank you for that. So now let's talk about, I never thought about business continuity from the standpoint of like an overnight success or going viral or exploding, which can happen for sure. Mm-hmm. Like phones can just ring off the hook, and it can also be like, if that happens, there will be certain industries that during disaster, as an example, like let's say if there is a hurricane, yep, like a construction company can be like, and like a roofing company can just get calls and calls and calls and they cannot handle all of it. So that can be also a situation where they are going to have like this amazing amount of inflow, like calls coming in, but maybe they cannot handle it for the same reasons and the same scenario that you described can happen. Right. So what are your recommendations to handle business continuity when that happens, when you are actually a great success, an overnight great success, or something happened where you actually have more business than you can service.
Right. So I think I've heard somebody, I was in an entrepreneur group and someone's like, you just charge more. I'm like, that doesn't solve the problem. That you still have the issue of like, you still have to serve people. You can't change your price. You can't raise your prices. It's not going to make the problem go away. But when it's something like like you said, these construction or roofing businesses, what would be really great for them, they will raise their prices because it's demand. But what they can do is in advance, do something like get a team of people that they have lined up that they can have who are part-time workers who will augment, kind of like contractors who are ready to come in, and they'll have this list of them ready and available so they can call up and be like, hey, we're expecting a hurricane to hit in a week. We expect this. We're expecting this much damage in this area. We're expecting this much business. So we have that agreed in advance. And that's another thing too. When you do these preparations and you agree in advance, you agree to the best economic terms as well. So everybody winds up winning in that instance. So I would say that's one of the things you could absolutely take care of in advance, in advance of anticipating a lot of business coming in.
That's a great idea. So who are your typical clients? Who comes to, like, what businesses or what circumstances gets them to think, well, I need business continuity? I mean, it seems to me like everybody should have a plan, but as we know, sometimes people don't act until something happens, right? So what do you see in terms of your typical client?
Okay, so I used to say there's two, now there's a third one. So typically when it's the clients who want business continuity, it's either going to be a real leader who is very forward thinking and wants to be agile. And they understand that they need to have this stuff figured out so they can grow, so they can pivot quickly if that's one of the things that they're going to wind up having to do. And they're very interested in securing this so they have a solid base from which to operate from. The second one would traditionally be somebody who's standing on a burning platform, like, oh my God, this has happened to me. I'm in a lot of pain. I need help. Help me. And now the third one is newer because certain people are having this come to Jesus moment. If they're in a certain industries require them to have business continuity plans. Or if they want to get maybe a cyber insurance policy, cyber insurance salespeople require you to have business continuity plan before you can even get a cyber insurance policy. So it's going to be real leaders, people who are standing on a burning platform, or people who are doing it because they're required to.
Yeah, understood. So what are the key components that you usually include in a business continuity plan?
So you go through the basic process first is a risk impact analysis. So you figure out what the vulnerabilities and the threats are, the likelihood, you do some heat mapping when it comes to risk. And then you start doing SOPs based off of that, or you enhance the current SOPs to start mitigating some of these risks. Or then you make some decisions where you go through the assessment of, is this a risk that we're going to accept, or we're going to avoid altogether and just not even do this thing at all? And so it's not an issue that we're ever going to have. So you think about what you're going to be doing. Then you do a business impact analysis is the second major step after you do the risk assessment. Now, the business impact analysis you do first, you figure out two things. Number one is it's called the recovery time objective. So a lot of people like to think, oh, my most important and vital operation is this. Okay, let's look at an 8-hour time frame. If we took this thing away, how long can your business operate without it? And the 8 hours is usually the demarcation line. If it's 8 hours or less, it's regarded as a critical operation. If it can be down for more than 8 hours, it's not critical. But I'm going to put a little pin in that. I'll come back to that in a second because there's a little asterisk I want to talk about. So when you start figuring out, okay, I can't be without this for 30 minutes, otherwise my business is dead, then that's something they're going to wind up saying, okay, this is really important. This is a critical operation. And this other thing, like, oh, it's 14 hours. We can be fine without that. We don't need to worry about that. So that starts to help with how much you're going to spend on shoring up those things, doing control measures, doing backups, all that stuff you're going to spend to make sure that you can be continuous in that particular operation. However, like I said, I have a pin in that if it's more than 8 hours. If that 14-hour operation is required to be running for that 30-minute operation to be running, then all of a sudden that becomes more important. So it's not just a definite like, and that's kind of what I say about anybody who does risk management. And I find a lot like, oh, I have a solution. It's like, go further. The solution may not actually be the thing that's right in front of your face because you think, oh, it's done. It's taken care of. It's 14. I don't need to care. It's like, but let's look at what that really involves. And that's why I like to go into the second and third and fourth order effect of things. You're not safe. You're safe once I figure out the trickle down effect, and if you're safe at that point.
Absolutely. Anything else that you think is important for our listeners to know when they're looking at a business continuity plan?
See how many single points of failure you have, what kind of backups you have. It's one thing to identify that you need a control measure. A control measure would be something simple like a fire extinguisher is a control measure for fire in your physical location. It's another thing to actually have one, or even two. You can have a backup generator, but if your generator only lasts for 3 hours and it's a hurricane coming, and what you have, you're likely going to be without power for more than 3 hours. So you're going to need, it's going those extra steps, figuring out what you have, start taking things away one by one, and see how would your company operate without it, and if it can.
Right. So you're basically saying we need to predict, right? We need to look at what we have. We need to look at different solutions, and then basically forecast it into the future in terms of like the what if scenario. I mean, if I actually need to use the generator, what question should I ask? How would I find out how is it really impacting my business and the continuity, and find those answers and prepare ahead of time?
Right. So I like to say that, I can't predict the future, but I can help you shape it. And, if you're thinking, oh, I have a generator, okay, cool. And then what? Worry about whether or not it works. That's what I said. Don't give yourself a false sense of security that it's taken care of. You have to go the extra mile. And it helps to have somebody like me, who's a professional who thinks about this stuff all the time. I do it mainly because I'm a nerd about this stuff, right? So I see it everywhere, and I'm like, oh, do you see this? Oh, do you see this? It's just natural for me to see these issues. And it's the first thing I think of when I hear certain current event stuff. I'm like, ooh, that's business continuity. Ooh, that's business continuity. Even if it's not plainly business continuity, I see it that way.
Absolutely. What would be the final result of actually having a good continuity plan?
The final result should be that you don't ever have to use it, because it becomes, and people, this is the hard thing about business continuity. People want a shiny box with a button they can press and say, this is what I just spent my money on. This is how it works. But the proof of concept is almost instantaneous, because you are inherently more secure. So a lot of the things that are going on, may just be a hiccup. It's like, oh, this always happens at this time. We've got this under control. It's not a big deal. That's what business continuity allows you to do, as opposed to it halting your business and stopping your business and having to tell your clients and stakeholders, like, I can't serve you today because of this. It becomes routine. It becomes business as usual. It makes things that would be disasters and disruptions business as usual. But then when you have a massive disaster, that's when, people think they really get the metal of it. They really get to see, like, oh, this is what I spent all my money on. I hope that happens to a point, but at the same time, I don't. Why would I want you to suffer through a disaster? Exactly. I don't want you to. I want you to be A-okay. I want your regular business operations to be wonderful for everybody, because at the end of the day, you're a dreamer as a business owner, right? And you provide a wonderful resource to the community. You're enhancing people's lives by what you do. You're also paying your employees money, which means they can afford to pay for their necessities and buy things that enhance their lives. It's a beautiful cycle to be part of. And why wouldn't I want to help that continue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gives you a sense of security, because you're drilled, you know what to do, and you know that if something happens, you're not going to panic. So I think it absolutely gives you a sense of security, and that's very important.
Well, I also think, Adi, when you said you're drilled, then the important thing is people are like, oh, I have a business continuity plan, I'm good, right? It's like, no, you have to actually exercise it, because you don't know if it works unless you're trying it out. And then when you find out, I actually like plans that fail, because it's like, oh, that's something we missed. We can do this better. Let's fix it. So you're even stronger. And it's kind of like, I made this analogy a lot with like football. So in the Super Bowl last year, again, because I'm always thinking about this stuff, it came down to the last couple of seconds on the clock. They were almost at toward the end zone to score a touchdown. And they were like, they practiced these plays all season long, just in the event that this is what happens in the Super Bowl. And I'm like, that is continuity. You're practicing this. So if this is not the first time you're trying this, because the odds of you succeeding the first time you try like a Hail Mary pass, it's probably not going to succeed. But if you've practiced them under that kind of pressure constraints with 3 seconds left on the clock, then there's a better chance of you succeeding. And that's really what I care about, the chance of success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you share a story where you helped a client and it really made a huge impact in terms of the business continuity?
Yeah, I'd probably say I love using this example. I've used it a lot because I think it's just a wonderful example of someone getting it. So when I wrote my book, before I published it, I gave it to a couple of pre-readers because I wanted to make sure that it made sense and that like people got stuff out of it. So I gave a different swath of people. And one of them was a solopreneur who works out of her home, and she makes cupcakes and baked goods. And I had said to her, so what do you think of the book? She goes, really great, really easy read, learned a lot about business continuity, but I can't use it until I grow. And I went, okay, hold on a second. I'm going to ask you some questions. And I started asking her these questions. Like I said, I'm a lawyer, so I can ask questions in a way that I get information I don't have. So I'm like, explain like I'm 5. How do you make cupcakes? She's like, you bake them. I go, no, like I'm 5. I don't want you to skip over anything, because if you talk to me like I'm your equal, you assume I have a knowledge base that I might not have. So I'm like, talk to me like I'm 5. She's like, okay, you take flour, sugar, eggs. I go, where do you get these things from? I have a vendor. I said, one? She said, yeah. I go, that's a single point of failure. You need more than one. You need a backup, because what if that vendor can't serve you that day? What if they can't deliver? She's like, I never thought of that. I was like, okay, let's continue. And then the more I asked her questions, the more I kept saying, okay, that's a single point of failure. That's a single point of failure. That's a single point of failure. And I don't ascribe to, if a theory works, I'm going to work it in. It makes sense. So in manufacturing, large scale manufacturing, they call it a safety supply stock. So it means you're making stuff in advance and you're storing it somewhere. So in case your operations go down, you still have product to sell and to put out on the shelves. So I said, do you have a safety supply stock of icing? She's like, what is that? I said, can you make icing in advance? She's like, yeah. I said, tell me about it. She's like, at room temp, it's a week. Refrigerator, it's 3 weeks. If it's the freezer, it's 6 months. I said, okay, do you have that? And she said, no. I said, why not? She goes, never thought of it. I said, cool. What if your daughter has to go to the ER and you have a client order due in an hour? If you had a safety supply stock, you wouldn't have to make a decision. You could do both. And she was like, oh my God, I have so much work to do. And there's a lot more stuff we talked about. And then I followed up with her to see how she implemented everything. And she's like, you don't understand. I can't unsee this stuff now. I was like, yeah. She's like, I really thought I couldn't do business continuity till I grew, but I realized I can't grow without business continuity. And I was like, thank you. And then I even talked to another one, a CFO. And I just wanted to know, like, I was just reviewing their existing plan. And I said, all right, tell me, what keeps you up at night? What worries you? He's like, phishing. And I said, well, that is a really hard thing to protect against. So, tell me about your cyber posture. He's like, we have MFA, we have VPN. I said, okay, good. I said, all right, well, let's go on. Tell me about your physical security, your physical structures. He's like, oh, we're good. I said, oh, you have a plan? And he goes, no, we're fully remote company. I went, uh-huh. How many employees do you have? He goes, 120. I said, cool. Are they all located in your state, or are they spread throughout the United States? He's like, all throughout the United States. I said, cool. Are they clustered anywhere? Like Houston, Tampa, the North Carolina coast? He goes, oh yeah, we have quite a few in the North Carolina coast. I go, have you figured out why I'm asking you yet? He said, no. I said, okay, hurricanes? And he goes, oh yeah, like there was a really bad hurricane 3 years ago, and the people in North Carolina, we have like 14 of them there, they couldn't work for about 2 weeks. I said, so remember when you told me you didn't have a physical structure to worry about? He said, yeah. I said, you have 120 to worry about. And his face, he just turned white. And he was like, oh. I was like, but this is how I see things, right? It's like,
absolutely. And it should be, because that is what we need to take into account, because that is going to stop our production. I'm like right now thinking about several things that go like, oh, I have to start worrying about it, or do something about, not worry, do something about it.
yes.
Absolutely. So Erika, tell me, from your perspective, why processes are so important for businesses? Why documented processes are so important for businesses?
Oh my God. So, I mean, I'll throw out the statistic. I'm sure people have heard this, and I'm sure you might even talk about it yourself, that the 80% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years, but only 5% of franchises do. What is the difference between them? One of them has SOPs and business continuity. So having everything figured out in advance, written down, it takes away the stress, it takes away the confusion, it gives you a plan of action. It also allows anybody to come in and inherently understand how things are done. So it speeds up the ramping up process of bringing on new people. It also allows somebody who knows nothing about what you're doing to come in and take care of things. And it's like, oh my God, we never thought we'd have this. What do we do? Here's your step-by-step. It helps calm people down, not just the owner who is running the business, but everybody who's on that team. If it's like, okay, I have a playbook now, I know what to do, I don't have to think. This works really well, and it allows us to handle the situation no matter what it is. And one of the things that we did in the military, and I don't understand why more civilian companies don't do this, we called it a continuity book, appropriately so, because every time we had to move, there wasn't always the opportunity to do a left seat, right seat training. Sometimes we had to move weeks in advance of the person coming to backfill us. And what you would do is you were required to create a book or a binder or a disc with the templates of the things you did most, with a list of the things that what meetings you had to go to, what the battle rhythm was, what your expectations were at that meeting. So when the person comes in knowing nothing at all about the job, they can just pick up and have a greater than 50% chance of being successful right out of the gate. They'll never be as good as you right out the gate. That takes some time. There's still some, learning curve there, but starting off at that point is so great, which is why we can plug and play, and why civilian companies don't do this is odd to me.
Well, it is. I mean, that's what we do, is like we do that knowledge transfer, and we do that. What do you do? Like, what are your best practices, for that particular reason? Like, if somebody leaves tomorrow, somebody can step in, right? So I agree with you. It totally needs to be done. That's a great viewpoint. Wow, Erika, that's fantastic. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
So my website is the easiest thing. There's a huge clearinghouse of information there. Like, I have a blog on there. Every podcast I've been on, some videos of some of the appearances I've had as well are on there. And that is www.eaasc.com. The C is for consulting. Somebody grabbed EAS before me, unfortunately. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but I have a caveat. If you try to connect with me on LinkedIn, you have to send me a message. I don't take blind or naked requests.
Absolutely. We have to make sure that we have that risk mitigation there, the business continuity. Love it, Erika. What a great podcast with a lot of information. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot, and I definitely encourage our listeners to contact you and also to take action. I'm sure something resonated with you today, and so take action. Don't just put it off because it might be too late. But right here, Erika just proved she's an expert at this, and business resiliency, business continuity, super important. So thank you very much, Erika, for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.